As we've seen, any standard form categorical syllogism only has three terms, S, P, and M. So what if we see more than three terms? If those terms include term complements of one another, that is non-S, non-P, non-M, then we might be able to perform operations on the propositions within the syllogism in order to reduce it down to having only three terms, because it having only three terms is the only way for it to be standard form, such that we can then tell its validity in the normal way. So we can use what we learned about in the last chapter, conversion, obversion, and contraposition, in order to shift propositions into logically equivalent propositions so that we can reduce the number of terms. So we can perform conversion on E and I claims, obversion on any claim, and contraposition on A and O claims. So let's look at an example to kind of show what this looks like. So see this argument. First, we're going to need to translate this argument into symbols. So let's assign a letter to each term. People who regret their crimes will give an R. Convicted murderers will be C. People susceptible of reform, let's call that P. Okay. So we see some people who do not regret their crimes are convicted murderers. So people who do not regret their crimes is an R, it's non-R. Are convicted murderers are C. Premise 2 here, all people susceptible of being reformed are people who regret their crimes. That's going to be all P are R. So the conclusion, some convicted murderers are people incapable of being reformed. That would be non-P. So some C are non-P. We have an I, an A, and an I. And we do see some term complements. We see P and non-P, and we see R and non-R. So we want to get down to three terms only. So let's remind ourselves what each of these operations does so that we can think through how to get our argument to three terms. Conversion switches the subject and the predicate. Obversion changes the quality and replaces the predicate with its term complement. And contraposition switches the subject and the predicate and replaces both with their term complement. And remember that in our argument, we are going to need to either change non-R to R somehow, and also change non-P to P somehow, or vice versa. We could also change P to non-P. But let's see if we can get this argument to one that only has P, R, and C. So first, let's perform obversion on this I claim. Obversion changes the quality, so we're going to, instead of R non-P, it's going to be R not, and we replace the predicate with its term complement, so it turns into P instead of non-P. All right, so now we have only P, but we still have a non-R. So with this one, it's a little tricky. We're going to perform two operations. First conversion, then obversion. And this ends up with some C are not R, all P are R, some C are not P. Then we have to flip the premises in order for this to be standard form, because remember, the subject of the conclusion comes second in the premises if we're looking at the diagrams of which type of figure. And the middle terms both are on the right, so that means that, remind ourselves of the figure diagram in our mind, that means that this argument is an AOO2. Is it valid? Well, remember, let's check what's distributed. Universal claims distribute subject, negative distributes predicate. So I've highlighted which claims here are distributed. And we can see that the middle term is distributed. That's great. There is an affirmative premise. There is a particular conclusion with a particular premise. There's a negative conclusion and a negative premise. Not seeing any rules being broken here. So let's look at the Venn diagram of this argument to see if that's validated. R, C, P. Fill in the universal premise first, then fill in the particular premise. Some C are not R. Does it follow that some C are not P? Yes, it does follow. Wow, so this argument is valid. So I hope me running through that example helps you get the concept of reducing terms. What we're trying to do is get down to three terms in a syllogism And it may take some practice with running through examples yourself in order to feel confident in doing this, because it does take a kind of ability to think your way through, okay, which operations do I need to perform in order to be able to get this argument down to 3 terms. Just remember, you can do conversion on E and I, obversion on any, and contraposition on A and O. All those operations, if done on the appropriate type of proposition, preserve truth value and come up with something that's logically equivalent. So I encourage you to get lots of practice, and if you come across one that you have trouble with and you want me to run through it in a video, let me know.